Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had not just a good lunch, but you fed your intellect and had some great discussions as well. As I mentioned earlier, before we broke for lunch, we're going to have some roundtable discussion this afternoon, some panels that are going to explore a bit more the issues that we're considering during this conference about sustainable food and nutrition security, about economic well-being, and about healthy lives, all in relation to the livestock sector and the opportunities and challenges. In particular, we're asking our panelists and our chairs to bring together some ideas around what does this mean for this aspect of the livestock sector in 2054. And we're going to use those interventions to guide some of the discussions that we'll have tomorrow on the ILRI campus, when we will have 4 parallel sessions, again giving a chance to really go into a bit more depth in some of these areas, to probe not just the science, but the science, the research for development that's needed in order for research to make a difference in terms of these major development challenges. So be part of this afternoon's discussion, carry what you learn, what you get stimulated to think about, the ideas it generates, carry that forward to be part of the discussion tomorrow, because it's a real opportunity to influence how not just ILRI, but partners in the research, in the development, private sector, investors, all have a chance to be part of this as we go forward. So, without further ado, we want you to be part of these discussions as well, as much as possible. So in addition to a panel chair who's going to lead off and engage with the people up here on the stage, you will also find on your tables some papers like this. And you'll see it has 2 sides. On one side it says, ask a question of the panel. So if during the course of the discussion you're listening to, you think, these people, they've not touched this. I need to know about this. I'd like to hear what they think. Please write your intervention, hand it to one of the ushers. These beautiful ladies you see around are our ushers, and they'll collect it and bring it up here, and we'll do our best to feed it into the discussion. If you, during the course of the afternoon, don't add a question, we still want you to fill up the other side of this piece of paper before you go to the reception this evening, because this is asking for your input into what are the challenges and what are the opportunities with regard to the livestock sector going forward to 2054. So I'll probably remind you about this again, but for now, there we go. So with that, I'm going to introduce our first panel chair, and she will introduce in turn her panel members. And I'm very pleased to welcome Joyce Cacho, who is Principal Advisor with Adinura Advisory, LLC, based in the USA. Joyce is experienced in strategic investment decision-making in emerging and developing market economies. She's got experience in the whole area of agricultural entrepreneurship, and she's been involved in designing local business interventions to empower local people to innovate, problem solve, and increase investment. At the moment, Joyce is an advisor or a consultant with Agribusiness and Gender and Agribusiness and Youth in the Department of Rural Economy and Agriculture here in Ethiopia at the Africa Union Commission. So please warmly welcome Joyce.
Good afternoon. Okay, I realize that we are the after lunch first up. So let's try that good afternoon again. Good afternoon. Excellent. Wonderful to see you all back here. And this morning when we were opening, and we were told the wise words of a former board chair of ILRI, who said, the sweet time was when the 2 institutions merged. The sweeter time is today. And so I will hopefully bring to you, along with the panel, how we can move ahead in this sweeter time. Before moving ahead, let me introduce our august panelists. We have with us, to my immediate right, Ushewokunze-Obatolu, Principal Director, Department of Livestock and Veterinary Services in Zimbabwe, in the Ministry of Agriculture, Mechanization and Irrigation Development. She, by training, is an epidemiologist and a public health veterinarian, and she spent over 30 years in the ministry. Immediately beside her, we have His Excellency State Minister Gabriel Johannes, who is looking at the Livestock Resources Development Sector, Ethiopian Ministry of Agriculture. The second gentleman on the panel is Emmanuel Kassi, currently working as Program Manager Pastoralist with Care Ethiopia. We were huddling earlier today, and I really liked Emmanuel's hands-on experience in the pastoral communities. He hasn't been located in Addis but for the last 5 years, and so that's really very refreshing. And our last panelist is Lucy Lapa, who is a senior scientist with ILRI Vietnam, where she's with the Integrated Sciences team. Lucy holds a PhD from The Ohio University in Ohio State University, in agricultural economics. It was mentioned that I am with the Africa Union's Department of Rural Economy and Agriculture at the moment. I am consulting with them. I also heard in the remarks this morning reference to the Malabo Declaration. And I bring it up because as sweet as this moment is, it'd be even sweeter if we all coordinated along continental frameworks, such as the Comprehensive African Agricultural Development Program. That's getting ready to kick off its new 10-year strategy with a results framework. And I encourage you to go to the website and have a look at the structure of the program and figure out where you plug in. Our motto for CADP 2015-2025 is that it's in our hands. And I think that's exactly what we're here to talk about. So without further ado, let me throw the first question out to Your Excellency Gabriel Johannes. We are sitting in not only the cradle of humankind, but the country on the continent that has the third largest population base, environmental issues of deforestation, overgrazing, soil erosion, and you know the list. Ethiopia is signatory to party to biodiversity, climate change Kyoto Protocol. In the spirit of looking at ILRI's strategic plan, the number 4 critical issue around securing sustainable and appropriate funding for building livestock value chains. Can you tell us a bit about the how? You've been in place for about 18 months. You're as head of this new ministry. Can you tell us a bit around the how of 2 of your core drivers to your ministry? One is scaling up, and the second is around engaging private enterprise. How are you doing that 18 months into your role?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. First of all, I would like to congratulate ILRI and ILRI staff for the 14th anniversary. I am also one of the fruits of ILRI, so ILRI has contributed a lot to my success to this date. Having said this, the issue raised on the scaling up, actually, I would like to mention one, what science can did, especially with the in relation to ILRI and the NARS, National Agricultural Research Institutions. In Ethiopia, we have the dairy sector in Ethiopia is not developed. We had many challenges, especially the challenge on the availability of the improved breeds. However, the science that ILRI developed during maybe ILCA developed in 1987, according to the publication from ILCA, they developed a technology on synchronization. However, that technology has not been used since till 2010. You can imagine how long it stayed in the shelf. However, what we did was we tried to use this technology in Tigray. I was at that time a researcher and also a DG of a regional research institute. We developed a project with ILRI staff. Then we tried to use that technology to synchronize farmers' cows, then produce crossbred heifers from their own indigenous breed. Then, with that technology, we managed to inseminate and improve the AI service that we used to give to our farmers. The success rate was, the normal AI service was about 27%, while the synchronized based AI was about 62%. Almost we doubled the result. So this was encouraging, and we tried to scale it up in Tigray. Even beyond Tigray, we brought that technology to other regional governments of Ethiopia, like the Amhara regional state, the Oromia, and Southern People's regional state. The way we scaled up is, one, we have extension system from the federal to the village level. We had farmers training centers. We have, in each farmers training center, we have 3 technicians. One is dealing with crop, another with livestock, the third one with natural resource. So through this extension system, we train farmers, we mobilized our farmers, then we managed to inseminate farmers' cows. Now the technology is widespread, and almost we reached to a level that this is a national program and is ongoing. This is also a promising technology that we will adopt in the coming even 15 years, because our master plan has also put this intervention as one of the priority interventions. Regarding this, the engagement of the private sector, of course, according to our definition, farmers are private sector. So we are working for the farmer, we are working with the farmer, and we are supporting the farmer. So the farmers are engaged. For instance, in the example that I gave you now, farmers are involved starting from the mobilization, involvement in the AI, and they even mobilized the precious property they have, the cow. So for a farmer, a cow means the highest property next to draft oxen. So farmers are now, because they develop the trust, they just mobilize their cows for the program. So we were managed to involve the private sector in this campaign. Of course, in others, we were also engaging private sector, but I just mentioned this one, how we are successful with this technology by involving the private sector. And of course, and the private sector is also expected to be engaged, because once we have the crossbred, the next will be, we will have milk. Then the milk has to go to the consumer through all the value chains. So the floor is open for the private sector to be engaged, to mobilize the resource in the value chain. So we have created a platform, a very nice, a good platform for the private sector to be involved in the dairy sector. So this is one example. Probably, if time allows, I can also add some more, because, for instance, the poultry development that we are doing this poultry development with the private sector. We are now mobilizing for instance, we have companies from outside Ethiopia who invested in the poultry business. We are working with the private sector in collaboration in identifying the farmers, in training the farmers, in the distribution of the day-old chick. Then now, we are now proving that the relay system of the poultry, which used to be exercised in other countries outside Ethiopia, are now giving a promising result. So we are working with the private sector, and the private sector is involved in many of the activities that we are doing.
Thank you very much. That's a great example, and we'll return to it. One of the other references we heard this morning was that the livestock sector has been slow to attract investment, public as well as private. What I heard from what you're saying is that in fact you are helping to manage supply chain risk. You're reducing supply chain risk by increasing the availability of successful AI in Ethiopia beyond the Tigray province. Unesu, what are you doing in Zimbabwe? Also around the topic of helping to manage supply chain risk, biological risk, that sort of thing.
Thank you, Joyce. And first of all, congratulations to ILRI. We in Zimbabwe and perhaps in Southern Africa at this moment are very happy to be associated with such a successful institution that is being properly directed to development, and development that is looking at the vulnerable. We are also looking at a very vulnerable resource, livestock resources themselves being biological objects. The animals we talk about are very highly vulnerable in their environment against from a number of risks which are biological, a number of risks which emanate from the environment, from exposure to chemicals, contamination. And when we take it further to processing, we are looking at risks in the processing industry, from contamination, from illicit behavior sometimes, unethical behavior, right to the time when the goods are available at the market. So our job in the private sector is to secure against that, that range of risks, to ensure that investment can occur, knowing that the value chains will succeed. And we do that through providing extension support, essentially. That starts from the time of breeding, by taking technologies from the research centers and making it available to producers, so that producers are breeding correct to their environmental needs. And then they produce correctly under good management practices to produce what the market expects. And therefore, the goods can be supplied and sold effectively, and lead to improvement of livelihoods and lives through incomes and profits that spare further investment into the sector. So that public support is essential. Of course, it happens in many other ways through provision of public infrastructure, but from a biological and quality service provision, we are there talking to the farmer, affecting the farmer, so that they are doing the right things and attracting investment and attracting consumer interest.
Thank you so much, Unesu. I think from an investment viewpoint, we're hearing that in Zimbabwe, you're reinvesting in extension. Tell us a little bit on how you're organizing that so that it can be more effectively delivered at lower cost.
Thank you very much. Yes, our organization, which delivers extension to the livestock sector, has been reconfiguring over the last 10 to 15 years. For the first time, about 10, 15 years ago, we had the establishment of the first department dedicated to promoting extension and development in the livestock sector. Now, about a year ago, we've just had a renewed effort at ensuring that we have sufficient numbers of well-trained cadres that can provide extension services to producers from the time of production up to the time of marketing. Of course, that's still evolving, but we are working at it, and also taking advantage of the presence of the private sector, who in many ways are already set up and doing some of that, delivering some of that extension. And we are trying to marry with them so that we can together help the producer maximize the benefits that they can derive from a market.
Super. I believe you told us about outgrower schemes, and that is the point of entry now, rather than going to all the individual smallholders.
Yes, in the old setup of our extension services, we have been pushing productivity, efficiency of production, without looking at much else. But what has happened now is that we have found that, in fact, even as it turns out at the present moment, we have a glut of poultry products after production which have not been linked to marketing systems. And the same applies also to pork. We've got a glut of pork, very good quality pork, but because the market has not been studied sufficiently, we find that there are weaknesses. So what we have been doing now is to extensively try to develop models that work at contract system, outgrower systems, that can already predict a market and then work with a set of producers and work targeted to the needs of particular marketing chains and guarantee success so that everybody is happy along the chain.
Right.
The one who is supplying inputs, the one who is producing, the one who is processing, there is no doubt that they will get their earnings or their profits.
Excellent. So we don't want anybody to lose their return on investment, do we?
No.
Okay. Can we turn to Lucy? Lucy, we heard about pork, and that immediately ties us we've heard about poultry, ties us to Asia and what's going on there. And can you speak a little bit about farmer organizations as part of contributing to developing not only supply chain and helping manage those risks, but also value chain?
Thank you, Joyce, and thank you very much for the opportunity to be a participant in this panel. I'm coming into this discussion with my perspective from Asia. And what we have learned through the years of working there in Asia is that, one of the main constraints why smallholder farmers are having difficulty getting into the market is because they are constrained by having access to inputs that could allow them to produce surplus that they could then sell to markets. And so one of the things that we first did when we worked there in the region is really look at some of these organizational arrangements, institutional arrangements that would provide opportunities for farmers to be linked to input markets as well as to be linked to output markets. We did a study on contract farming for pigs in Vietnam. We found that it doesn't necessarily, it provides all the benefits to those farmers who are able to participate there by having access to good quality breed, good quality inputs, and then having a secure market where they could sell despite volatility in output prices, for example. But not all smallholders can actually participate in that because of the high initial cost. What we have seen in the Philippines, on the other hand, is a private-led cooperative that was really formed by farmers themselves, and then it attracted private investors who are not really full-time pig farmers, but maybe retirees who have money to spend and invest. And so they invested it in this cooperative. And meanwhile, this cooperative had grown, not just providing piglets, but later on tried to even produce their own feed so that they benefit from economies of scale of volume purchase of feed ingredients. And these are made available to the members at lower cost per unit.
Thank you so much. So backward linkages from a cooperative-led initiative. Very interesting. Emmanuel, we have taken this discussion down the road of the traditional industrialization kind of thinking, outgrower schemes, animals being intensified in one place. Tell us a bit about the pastoralists and where your work in care is helping to support scale as well as private sector.
First of all, I would like to thank, congratulate ILRI and its partners for its 14 years anniversary. As far as pastoralism and pastoralists is concerned, as you already know, there are many challenges, but at the same time there are opportunities to boost up production, livestock production in the pastoral area. And one of the things we need to pay attention while we think of pastoralism is just a holistic kind of intervention with innovative approach. For instance, in pastoral area currently in care, we are intervening a program called PRIME, Pastoralist Resilience Improvement through Market Expansion. And this is a huge 5 years program funded by USAID. And it has 5 components: the livestock productivity, which is supported with natural resource management and climate change adaptation, and also alternative livelihood options for TOPS, for those transition after pastoralism. And at the same time, the fourth component is the knowledge management, which compiles lessons, researches on these activities. And the fifth one is the nutrition intervention. So one of the things, the new approach of this programming is the Innovative Investment Fund, and which is targeted for supporting to work with privates who is working with the value chain and the market. So this is targeted to work with a private company in order to increase privatization and expansion, privatization in the pastoral area. And currently in Somali area, where Mercy Corps, the lead for the Prime, is working with the prime company, and currently they supported one of the slaughterhouse expansion, and the milk processing planting expansion in Somali area is also under process. And also in care intervention area in Afar, we are also processing on the establishment of private milk processing in Awash area. And I think it's on a process. Early next year, the fund will be transferred to establish this private company.
Excellent. Thanks so very much. Maybe we can go back and think about what we've just said in terms of the words transformational, and recognizing that mixed farming is where many of our smallholder farmers are operating. And the fact that they do that at quote-unquote subsistence levels because they are excellent risk managers. We also heard this morning that these farmers want to make school fee payments. These farmers want to increase their assets, go from 1 cow to 2 cows. I ask each of you to reflect on how are those interventions that you're speaking of, how are they transformational, and specifically address how are they transformational for women in the community. We do have data to suggest on a very broad basis that 70% of the agricultural production in Africa, 70 to 80%, comes from smallholder farmers, and of that 70 to 80%, 60 to 70% are coming from women. So transformational, risk management at the household level and community level, and then specifically women. Because if it's going to be transformational, maybe we need to be addressing women.
Well, regarding the transformation of the smallholder farmers is concerned, actually most of the farming in Ethiopia is based on smallholder farming. But what we are doing is, in collaboration with ILRI, we are developing a master plan that can fit all the production systems that we have. One is the lowland grazing, the other is on the highland mixed crop livestock system, The third is of the specialized dairy farming in specialized farming in around the urban and peri-urban cities. So the transformation agenda is addressed according to the production systems that we have, and the livestock master plans that we are now developing try to assess the livestock sector for the coming 15 years. Then, based on the sector analysis, we are now developing a 5-year roadmap. And in the roadmap, we have put the interventions that are really can bring transformation in the sector. So, in doing so, we try to adopt a toolkit called Livestock Sector Analysis and Investment Toolkit. I hope most of you know this toolkit because some countries have already exercised this toolkit, and that toolkit is really very supportive. And through that toolkit, we try to project what will each intervention have an impact on the coming 10 or 5 years. So using that toolkit, we try to predict the demands, the supply, and the effect of the intervention. Of each intervention, the toolkit will gives the outcome, and impact. So even the toolkit also try to address even the contribution of the livestock sector to the national GDP. So the master plan is a guiding document for Ethiopia for the coming years, and we are now trying to exercise because Ethiopian plan will start the second national GDP. We call it GDP, the Growth and Transformation Plan, will start next September or July. So for the next GDP, the master plan has put the targets of the coming 5 years. So from that master plan, we have set our targets. Then it is through those interventions suggested by the master plan team that we can achieve the targets. So in doing so, the master plan will also give us an input as to what resource should invest, what budget should the government allocate, and also even the master plan has also identified the role of the private sector in terms of investment, what the opportunities for the private sector, and also even the funds that is expected from the private sector and also from the public. So the master plan will be a guiding document for us. And this master plan, of course, because of the toolkit, it cannot end up with the 5 years coming, but you can also just include even more years. So the master plan is now serving as a guide. Regarding the woman, actually, as a policy, Ethiopian government has put a clear direction that in every intervention, in every extension work, in every development activities, 30%, minimum of 30% women has to participate. So this has to be assured, always in any of the extension activities that we are doing, we have to incorporate women. If we can increase more than that, then that's okay, that's acceptable, but minimum of 30% has to be assured. So through this, we are now supporting women in the extension system. Besides, there are also packages that can support women, like the poultry, dairy are really feasible for women. So especially poultry, backyard poultry can support a woman household. So we are supporting women in that aspect, and even we are also those women which have lower income are also participating in the household asset building programs. So by participating the women in the household asset building programs, women are now starting to build assets so that they can transform their livelihood through time. So this is the intervention that we have regarding women.
Maybe we can hear from somebody else on the panel on the transformation and the closing the gender gap issues.
Well, I'll talk about my country, Zimbabwe. We actually, right now, are implementing a policy blueprint called the Zimbabwe Agenda for Social, Sustainable Social Development, ZIM Asset. And that has one area which is very relevant to this discussion, which is on food and nutrition security. And that opens the way for us to be able to look at issues of empowering communities and transforming communities, linking them deliberately to areas of growth in the economy, while also making sure that within their domestic environments, there is enough to eat for their families. And we know that, for instance, small stock, the small ruminants, poultry, the rabbits, they are the preserve almost of women and youth. If we are to talk broadly about the gender dimension, they are more responsible for those around the home, because that's where it suits the woman who is busy looking after the family to ensure that there is always enough food for the family, food for the guests, and food for the festivals. So we are particularly interested in ensuring that we move from a situation of underproduction into a situation of sufficiency for the house, for the household. And then also we can limit post-harvest losses, because we experience immeasurable post-harvest loss levels because of the vulnerabilities that I referred to earlier, the vulnerability to disease and pests, and the losses that happen because animals are dying from transboundary animal diseases. So we would ensure in the process that there is nutritional security, the health of the family is assured, and then also while we are exploiting the production systems for sufficiency and for market access, we are also encouraging that there is good stewardship for the environment. We will not look and do nothing when waste is just going to waste, but that waste can be recycled, that other systems which are interdependent are being created so that there is a good health all around to help the children, especially the children, the growing children, maximize from the improved feed resources, improved provision of protein sources that come from the animals. So it's really a tool in empowerment that looks at uplifting the society as a whole through livestock.
Thank you so much. We're fast running out of time, and maybe, as you mentioned, waste. I could ask Lucy specifically to talk about systems that consider little or no waste, that are integrated, so that you address reduction of feed costs through an integrated way of looking at no waste.
Yes, well, what I can share with you is what we have done in Southeast Asia, for example. For almost 7 years, we were supported by the Asian Development Bank to work on addressing productivity issues in crop livestock systems. So this was implemented in 5 countries. And the main focus there was really trying to identify opportunities for utilizing crop byproducts, crop residues, improving the value so that they are contributing to reducing cost per unit of feed, but also ensuring that there's some system sustainability there, because you are minimizing what you would call waste, things that normally you would not use. They are going into something that's productive, and so it's improving the overall productivity of the system.
Thank you so much. In the interest of helping us to stay on time, I think I'll be a little bit cautious in asking the questions from the floor. I really believe that you are the 5th panel member. However, I think given that we will have a time after the 3 roundtables to address questions, I will turn to the panel now and ask them the closing question, which is to project forward that it's now 2054 We've heard about 5-year plans. We've heard about 15-year plans. We've heard that next year the investment fund is going to take off here in Ethiopia. You know, we've heard about a switch in the thinking between waste. There is no waste. There are byproducts that can be integrated to make the livestock systems more efficient for the smallholder farmer, especially if they're in groups. So, you're talking about all this today. Project yourselves forward 40 years. There are 10 billion citizens on this earth. I say to you, I ask you, what does the livestock industry look like in 2054? The livestock industry look like in 2054? And how does what you have shared with us this afternoon reflect a return on the investment if we put down our investment today to focus on scaling up and embedding environment and social sustainability so that farmers are more empowered? Are we going to have more smallholder farmers? Are our pastoral areas going to look the same way that they do today? What do you have to say? And I think we'll start with, with Emmanuel, please.
Okay. As I mentioned, one of the things is to increase livestock production and ensure food security sustainably. Is that investment is one of the things. So what we are investing in innovation fund in the current time will be a good input for after 40 years to see what industrial livestock industry in the pastoral area, even in the greater Horn of Africa. So what's expected after 14 years is more business and industries will be growing in the urban and peri-urban area. The urban area growing. Food production, more food production would be expected from adaptive livestock like camel and goat, from goat, milk and meat, and from camel meat. And it's also expected that there will be more food supply and nutrition. There will be a proportional kind of animal source products will be seen. At the same time, while we are investing and working these days, there will be more financial service facilities in the pastoral area, whereby the pastoralists access to credit and financial access.
Thank you. Please take over, Usel. 40 years from now, what's it going to look like?
40 years from now, I would imagine a livestock sector which is a thriving business of choice, offering entrepreneurial opportunities for a variety of, makes of society, which does not discriminate youth, woman, old, young, and which is self-regulating and not waiting for government to come and tell them what to do, but that they know what should be done that's good for them.
I'll ask you to close. Lucy?
Okay, yeah. Well, in Asia, probably you will have less land available for everything because of the growing population there, and I think the Philippines is a contributor to that. What I would like to see 40 years from now is a value chain for any livestock commodity that's well coordinated, that's efficient, that's well performing, and it's also addressing some of these externalities properly or adequately, externalities around waste management, externalities around diseases. People will be, will no longer be worried about buying contaminated stuff, buying adulterated milk or buying pork that may have been injected with antibiotics and everything. So that's what I would like to see, and I think if we start thinking about how to ensure that this coordination is happening in the way we want to see the upgrading and transformation of the value chain, I think that that may require different types of partnerships. We need to work closely with the private sector. We need to make sure that smallholder farmers are well organized so that they're able to tap into the opportunities that the increasing demand for livestock is opening up.
Thank you, Lucy. Your Excellency, what do you see in 40 years after a robust 15-year master plan?
Well, probably in the future, unless we invest now, unless we start investing on livestock now, we will end up in a deficit of both milk, meat, and other animal products. So there is a need to invest now so that to secure after 20 or 30 years. So the direction should be in line with the increasing involvement of the private sector, so that the existing smallholder based farming should have to be transformed to a commercial type of business, and livestock in general would like to have engagement of the private sector highly. So the engagement of the private sector should be encouraged starting from now through different means. Like in our case, we have put different incentives for the private sector to invest, and also because unless the private sector comes into picture, the government alone cannot satisfy the existing demand in the existing and the forthcoming demands in both types of products, in all types of products. So the involvement of the private sector is crucial, and we need also to see transformation of the smallholder to commercial type of farming. Otherwise, other countries like Asian countries, nowadays they have good commercial poultry farms, but in our case we don't have commercial poultry farms. Unless we invest in poultry, then it's hard to fulfill the meat demand, the increasing meat demand in the country. So I hope this will be the same for other African countries as well. So the investment should be selective and should start now. Otherwise, the livestock sector has a potential to change, transform the livelihood of our people, and it has also a big potential in creating job opportunities. Most of the young youths and the women that we have are now, it's a good opportunity for them to get jobs through livestock production. The other thing that I would like to mention is on the pastoral areas. The pastoral areas, in case of Ethiopia, we have huge land in the pastoral areas, but the way they are now living, the way they base their livelihood is now has to be transformed. So government has put a clear direction to transform the livelihood of the pastoralists, and we are investing not only, of course, in Ethiopia, but we are also working at a regional level, so that the pastoralists in both countries, in all bordering, especially the IGAD countries, we are working on in the pastoral areas together. So we will have pastoralists resilient to shock. So we are now transforming the pastoralists through different interventions, and we will continue to do so in collaboration with our neighboring countries. So if we can do that, then we can transform the livelihood of our pastoralists through. But the key intervention areas that we identified are the natural resource, mainly the rangelands, and creating market infrastructure, extending the animal health service, and others are the key issues to transform the pastoralists. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. And as we wrap, and I see Shirley right here, in the last comment, we heard IGAD mentioned. I think we also heard it mentioned this morning. At the Africa Union, we are outwardly saying that the regional economic communities are our way to bring together all of Africa and the member states. So I encourage you to learn more about the regional economic community bodies, engage with them more, so that what we heard on the stage this afternoon about organizational arrangements being key pillars to looking forward to a 2054, where the livestock industry is truly responding to the needs of consumers for nutrition, to the economies, for the need for economic circulation and strength, can be realized. We've had 40 years of great research, 40 years of great potential. Let's look forward to really life beginning at 40. Join me in thanking our panel, please.